So the term symbiosis means living together, and you have animals that have some kind of very close interaction with one another. We often might think of those interactions as good things, as we saw in some of these videos, but sometimes they're not so good, and we'll get to that too. These symbiotic relationships together usually exist for an extended period of time, often the lifetimes of both of the organisms. So symbiosis, here's your example where maybe it's not so great, is parasitism, when an organism or organisms live in or on another organism, getting protection, nutrients, energy from their, what we call the other organism is the host. Then you have mutualism, the examples that you saw in the videos, where both of the organisms benefit from this long-term relationship. This term, I'm going to introduce it. I can't remember if it's in the objectives or not. Sometimes it's in there and then sometimes we take it out, but commensalism, it is something that in the ecology world is controversial, that a lot of ecologists will argue if this is actually a thing or not, that this is termed where one species benefits from the relationship and the other one isn't benefiting, nor are they harmed. But a lot of ecologists say that there's no way. What would that other species, why would they be involved in this? They've got to get some kind of benefit to participate in this relationship. So it's interesting with textbooks, the cycle of textbooks, whenever a new edition comes out, they ask a lot of professors around the country or even around the world to do reviews, and then based on what people say, they may like a term like this if there's a lot of just random ecologists in that pool of reviewers, they might say this doesn't exist, and then they pull it out for that edition, and then in the next edition they get a bunch of people who are not ecologists, and then it goes back in. They're like, no, I learned this in college, we got to put that back in. So you may see this in the future or may not. I just like to mention it. So parasitism. Parasite or parasites live in or on their host. Usually the host doesn't even know the parasite is there. Eventually the host may be weakened by this relationship. It could be a really long time before the parasite is detected. One of the things about the parasite is the parasite wants to go unnoticed. They want to live with their host as long as possible and benefit from this relationship. I always like to say, thinking about maybe a college student and their family, that if you have a good situation where you live with some working adults who give you food and a house and maybe a car and pay for your cell phone, if you have that kind of great situation, do you want to go home and kill them? No, you want to keep them around for a long period of time. And you want, of course, are kind of a tax on them because you might be taking a lot of their resources. Maybe you come home and you're a little cranky sometimes, and you want to keep your host person or people happy.
If you keep making that face, it's gonna stay like that.
I'm trying to get my own car insurance.
USAA. Grandpa was in the military. You shared membership with your mom so she can share with you. Easy.
USAA. Check if you're eligible today.
Beneath this peaceful landscape, a snail has eaten parasites. They've turned it into a zombie. These spectacular, bizarre, bulging eyeballs are the snail's tentacles. Inside them, parasitic worms have begun an amazing feat of mind control. These parasites have taken snail's tentacles and its brain. It's all part of an ingenious plan to extend the life of the parasite and its offspring. The snail has become possessed. It is doomed now to follow the parasite's will. And the parasite is on the move, looking for another host. Next, the parasite needs a bird. Hypnotized, the snails march into the sunshine. They climb from the shade to the tips of exposed branches above. The snail's tentacles, engorged now by their possessors, have grown to resemble a maggot. And a maggot is the favorite food of the birds above. In an instant, the bird attacks, and the parasite triumphs. The parasitic worm happily multiplies in the bird's stomach. Its final trick is to complete the cycle. But it will have little trouble, as the snails below graze on bird droppings, filled with a new batch of mind-controlling parasites. Once they're eaten, the hypnosis of the snails will continue, and the life cycle of the parasite will roll on.
It's amazing how clever these parasites can be. Parasites can be larger in size,
This is how to get in shape fast.
like that lamprey eel.
Start eating more of these. You might think.
This lamprey eel here will suction onto fish. Or you might be familiar with a leech, which is a smaller version of this, tapeworms. But also we do consider bacteria and even virus particles to be parasites. So mutualism. Mutualism is probably what you're most familiar with in terms of symbiosis and what you might relate symbiosis to. This is where both species benefit from this relationship. As you saw with the cleaning station or the anemone and the clownfish, there is an exchange of specific services for survival, like housing, definitely food, protection. You often will see all three of these involved, and many times they go both ways. So it could be something like, even if you remember back to cows who are ruminant herbivores, they have bacteria in their stomach that produce cellulase that help them to break down their main food source, grass, which has a high amount of cellulose, which is very difficult to break down. But it could be something larger like the clownfish and the anemone. Here's a unique situation where you have a mimic involved in mutualism, but as more of a parasitic relationship. The saber-toothed blenny will be more of a parasite, and the cleaner goby is in a mutualistic relationship. You have this saber-toothed blenny is a mimic of the cleaner gobies, these neon cleaner gobies, and they look very similar, but oftentimes the saber-toothed blenny will join that cleaning station and slip in there, and when the neon gobies are cleaning, they will come in, and instead of just gently picking off parasites and dead skin and cleaning up the other animals, they'll just like take a chunk of skin and actually bite the animal at the cleaning station. So interesting, like how mimicry can be involved in even these these mutualistic relationships. All right, last thing in terms of community I want to talk about is called the keystone species. Keystone species are species whom, if they are declining in number or something is negatively happening to this particular species, it can have widespread destructive impacts on the entire community, on all the species in an ecosystem. So these are very important species who determine the entire structure of a community, whether that community is a healthy and thriving community, or if that community is damaged and declining. Elephants are an example of this. Elephants will make sure that smaller trees out on the prairie area, they will take them down. They will remove trees so that it allows for more of these different variety of smaller plants to thrive. A lot of organisms rely on these smaller, just like when we were out on the prairie, you didn't see that many trees out there on the prairie. And what that does is it allows for smaller plants to thrive and support a greater variety of other organisms. When you have trees, it blocks the sunlight and you get less of this variety of smaller plants. Another example are these sea stars that are called, the genus name is Pisaster. If you've ever been to the west coast, northwest coast of the United States, you'll see these all over, these really brightly colored orange and purple and pinkish sea stars. And this ecologist, Robert Payne, I don't know why, but he was like, I think I should remove these. And he removed them and the entire community just imploded. That it got taken over by mussels, and the variety of organisms there went from being a huge variety of organisms present until like just a few species. And so a lot of species started to die off. When they began to reintroduce these sea stars, the whole community came back. You started to see much greater diversity in species, and the community became a lot healthier again. And this is a great video reinforcing this idea of keystone species.
Booking.com has all kinds of stays. Because a romantic hotel works.
The original keystone refers to a wedge-shaped slab at the peak of a stone arch. If you remove the keystone, you risk the whole thing tumbling down. And some ecosystems work the same way, relying on one keystone species. In biology, keystone species have a disproportionately large impact on their habitat, given their size or numbers. Their daily activities affect all kinds of other species, directly or indirectly. And a change in their numbers can cause a trophic cascade, where effects ripple through the ecosystem, often in surprising ways. Take the gray wolves of Yellowstone National Park in Wyoming. Their numbers dropped to 0 around the early 1930s, mostly because of hunting. But in 1995, wolves were reintroduced to the park, and the wolves' impact has been monitored ever since. Turns out that impact is seriously important. The wolves' absence and reintroduction changed Yellowstone in large and often surprising ways, right down to how the rivers flow. For one thing, wolves prey on elk, and the elk know it, so their behavior changes when wolves are in the area. Elk are generally nomadic, staying on the move as they munch on plants. But without any wolves around, the elk became much less cautious, preferring to settle down and eat a lot in one place at a time. The elk even ate all the way down to the riverbank, somewhere they wouldn't dare linger if there were wolves around. Instead of eating a little bit from a lot of different plants, they ate so much at a time that aspen and cottonwood trees declined, and so did the riverside willows that beavers and some songbirds depend on. And beavers are also keystone species because of their special engineering talents. Their dams slow the flow of rivers, preventing floods and offering a wide range of habitats for all kinds of species. Ever since wolves were reintroduced to Yellowstone, willows have grown better, beaver colonies have increased from just 1 to 9, and songbirds are flourishing too. Elk numbers declined at first, but now seem to have stabilized, and bison numbers are up, probably because of decreased competition from the elk. Research is ongoing to assess the wolves' long-term impact, considering the many subtle interconnections in this complex ecosystem.
So you may have heard about the wolves declining and then coming back and thinking, like, why would a wolf be something that we would want back in an ecosystem, especially where humans and national park like Yellowstone are present. But here you can see all of the information for that. Okay, you have animal behavior?
Yep.
Okay, let me call that up. This goes along with a lot of what we were talking about with community ecology, so kind of a continuance on this and how our behaviors as organisms affect others in our ecosystem. So a behavior is an observable activity of a living animal. I also like to expand this definition to organism, because you will see today as we look under the microscope and see the community from the pond that there are protists and maybe cyanobacteria, maybe fungi, things other than animals that have these behaviors, in addition to plants. So thinking about like what an organism does and how they do it. We'll look at two general categories, innate and learned behavior. Innate behaviors are instinctual. You're not sure why as a species you do it, but you just are compelled to do this behavior. Oftentimes when we're talking about behaviors, they help us as species to survive. So it goes back to evolution. These are behaviors that are just programmed in you. They are found in the coding of your DNA. So I know with DNA we often think about, well, DNA makes RNA, and then RNA makes proteins, and those proteins are the things that the central dogma says we make, but those proteins are not the only thing that are made. Those proteins may compel your nervous system to do something specific. Like when we talked about neurotransmitters, that you may have the instructions for a neurotransmitter in your DNA, and then that neurotransmitter, it makes you do something as a species. So this can get really complicated and complex. When we're talking about innate behaviors, these are behaviors that can be performed without having any experience doing it. They are oftentimes done completely and perfectly or near perfectly the first time a species tries to do it. Sometimes there might be a stimulus that makes this behavior happen. So for example, if we're talking about like menstruation, that when an animal gets to a certain age and they're a female, that the hypothalamus matures. And that stimulus of the hypothalamus maturing will produce GnRH, which will then stimulate the pituitary gland to produce LH and FSH, which then stimulates that whole process of the ovulatory cycle and the menstrual cycle. Sometimes we see these behaviors performed immediately after birth. When a human baby is born, the whole team of people that are there are waiting for that baby to cry. What that means is that the lungs are clear of the amniotic fluid and that the baby can now breathe air and breathe on its own. So let's talk, I know this was mentioned in a video last time, cuckoo chicks, they do what's called brood parasitism. A mother cuckoo chick, she has an instinct to lay or take her egg, lay it or put it into another bird's nest. what that does is it puts the onus on the other species to sit on, keep warm, and tend to her own egg. And she could just like go off and do whatever else she wants. But not only does the mother have this instinct in the situation, but the baby, when the baby hatches, also has its own set of instincts, where when the baby is born and comes out, hatches out of the egg, it has instincts to look at the other eggs in the nest and go, no, I want all the attention, I want all the nutrients and the energy, so I'm going to push all the other eggs out of the nest. And you can see in this picture, it's pushing eggs out. So that, and here's the other wild thing, is that when the other species of bird comes, they're just like, okay, my other eggs are gone, but I got this one who doesn't look anything like me, but I'm gonna feed it and nurture it and take care of it. So pretty wild example here, both with the parents as well as the offspring. I'm going to kind of go through this a little more quickly. Sea turtle hatchlings, their instinct is to go toward the brightest spot on the horizon, which is the moon. The moon is over water. They often hatch at night. If they hatch in the morning, the sun is also over the water. So they're always driven to go toward the water. So now let's talk about learned behaviors. As humans, our lives are directed by learned behaviors. It's a huge emphasis. We go to school for years and years, right, to learn and to change and to grow, to become proper adults in society. And learned behaviors are the ability to make changes to your behavior based on your experience and what you are learning every time. There's a lot of different kinds of learned behaviors, so not just, us going to school. Even when we're little babies, we watch, listen, we learn how to speak. Birds, this one I think is so amazing. Birds who migrate from like northern Canada down to South America and back within a year's time. How do they do that? They don't have an app, right, directing them where to go, but they read the stars. They look at the configuration of the stars, and then they use the stars to figure out where they need to go next. That's quite an intelligence. Or something as simple as a frog bites a distasteful or poisonous, some kind of other insect, or not other insect, they're not insect, bites an insect who is distasteful or poisonous, and its instinct is to spit it right out. Their next instinct is when they see something that looks like that or a mimic of that species, is that they're like, nope, I remember that coloration, I remember that kind of species, and I'm not gonna eat that again. If you ever have eaten somewhere and you got food poisoning, do you ever go back to that restaurant? It might be years and years and years. When I was, I think like 11, I got food poisoning at Taco Bell. I've never eaten at Taco Bell again. Because I just look at it like, no, I remember that experience was not good. We're gonna go from simple behaviors to more complex. So simple learning is, one example is called habituation. I'm trying to teach my 11-year-old son this right now. This is something as adults we become better and better and better, usually, not all of us. But habituation means that you have a declined response to a constant stimulus. If you have a sibling or a cousin or somebody at school and they would do things like, and do that and keep touching you and touching you and touching you, what do they want? They want attention, right? They're not hurting you, it's not infringing on your survival, but they just want to be known. They want to bother you. If somebody is doing this to you and you react like, right? They're like, I know I can get them. So I'm gonna do that to that person because it bugs them a lot. But if they do this and you just totally ignore that they're there, they might try it again. And if you ignore them, then they're like, oh, this person isn't worth my time. They're not going to be bothered by me. They're not going to get my attention. So habituation means that you decline your response to a stimulus that you realize this is not infringing on my safety, so I'm just gonna not pay attention to it. There was a study done with sea anemones, as we just saw in the videos earlier. And in a tank, somebody took a pointer and they kept poking at the tentacles of the sea anemone. And the sea anemone would, you could see in the picture below, that the sea anemone would pull all of its tentacles inside of its gastrovascular cavity. Then slowly the sea anemone's tentacles will come back out, and then they would poke the sea anemone again, just give it a touch, and they'd pull them back in. And by the third time, the sea anemone's like, whatever's touching me, it doesn't want to eat me, so I don't have to really worry about it. And by the third time that it gets touched, it just stays. It doesn't pay any attention. In the real world, this thing that is poking it could just be like a piece of seagrass that's floating by and stuck on something else that keeps touching that sea anemone. It's not worth the sea anemone's energy to keep pulling its body in every time, because whatever that stimulus of that algae, it's not going to kill it, it's not going to eat it, it's doing no harm. So they don't have to expend the energy dealing with it. Conditioning, it's a learned association between a stimulus and some kind of response. This is what we call more complex learning. It's trial and error learning. You try something, it doesn't work out so well. As a cognitive organism, we're like, okay, this didn't work. Let me try something else to see if I can get to my goal of whatever I'm trying to do. And you try something different, and you try something different. You learn from appropriate responses to your behaviors. Is this helping me? Is this hindering me? Should I waste my time trying the same thing over again? This is what I'm trying to teach my 13-year-old. So he's doing his laundry, and for some reason, he presses the button and nothing happens. So he starts pressing it harder and harder and harder. I'm like, you're going to break the washing machine. Do you not realize that pressing that button, which you do not have to pound on, it's not working. So try something different. And he goes, oh yeah, that's conditioning. And I was like, yeah, very good. So if, for example, if we're talking about like a toad and a bee, that if a toad eats a bee and it stings it inside of its mouth, the toad will spit that bee out. And then again, it will not try and eat that bee, it will try and eat other things that will potentially not sting it. It also will, again, stay away from that particular kind of looking animal. Operant conditioning. Operant conditioning we use a lot with training. This is the interesting thing about operant conditioning, is that especially as like teachers or parents, that one of the things that we know, giving rewards for behavior more significantly affects the positive outcomes of a behavior changing. When you give negative feedback or you hurt the other organism based on their behavior, usually other behaviors become very negative also. That it is better to give a reward than a punishment. So we see this, simply with dolphin training. And imagine that if the trainers are doing some kind of like signaling, they're trying to get the dolphin to do some kind of behavior, and the dolphin goes out and does it, and they do it wrong, and the dolphin comes back, and we often do not see the trainer kick the dolphin in the head, right? What do they usually do? They give them a fish, or they say, and then they give the signal again, and the dolphin tries it again, and if they do it when they finally do it right, they get that reward. This is another interesting, these are interesting examples, like insight learning. This is more complex. This is where you have a problem to solve, and you try different ways to solve it. So it just takes your conditioning to a higher level. So a dog, let's say that the dog is on chain, and the dog sees its bone over here, and it goes around the tree to get to it, and it's frustrated because it's just not enough slack, that eventually the dog may go back around and then try the other way to give it some more slack to get to the bone. There was a study done with chimpanzees where they put 2 boxes on either side of a room and had a bunch of bananas hanging in the middle of the room. And the first thing the chimpanzee did was go to the middle of the room and try and jump up and get the bananas, and the chimpanzee couldn't get to them. Then the chimpanzee, frustrated, looked around and went, oh, let me grab that box. If I put that box underneath and I jump off that box, I might be able to get it. And it used 1 box and still couldn't get it. And then it went and got the second box, and the second box got it close enough and it could get the bananas. So, imprinting. Imprinting is like an in-between of instinctual learning and learning itself. Or I should say instinct and learning. It's a combination of the two. That it has innate constraints on learning, that at a certain stimulus, a certain point in an organism's life, they are given the instinct, or they have the instinct to do something, but it's not always performed perfect the first time, that they try and do this behavior and it gets better over time. So it's a little bit of combination of the two, of innate and learning together. At this stimulus, they learn information as they go. Or you, for example, driving, right? We have a lot of instincts when we get behind the wheel of a car and what we have to do. You know that you're going to have to start pushing on the brake. Nobody has to tell you that. You just instinctually know. However, combination of maybe cell phones, and you've got your cell phone and you're kind of looking at that. Maybe you realize, hey, when I'm using my cell phone, I probably should stay about 5 car lengths back because I'm not paying attention to how close I have to stop anymore. So you add extra stimuli. Could be, for example, sea turtles. This is fascinating. That female sea turtles, the beach in which they are born, they could swim all the way to the other side of the world. There have been researchers who take sea turtles, they put a transmitter on them, they mark them, they move them from our side of the world, they take them over to the Indo-Pacific, they leave them there, and what they find is when that turtle comes to the age that they can lay eggs, that she will come all the way across the world, and within a few miles, that she will lay her eggs where she was born. So they also found that over time, that perhaps the first time she comes within 20 miles, and then the next year she comes within 10 miles, and she gets closer and closer to that beach where she was born over the years. So she's learning something based on her behaviors. Am I oversimplifying this innate versus learned behaviors? Yeah. Animals are super duper, or I should say organisms are super complex. The world around us, the nature part of natural selection, changes. So we often are doing these combination of innate behavior and learned behaviors. Without both of these, you would not see the survival of species for such a long period of time. The other thing too is that we are told early on that humans are the smartest animals on the planet, maybe the smartest organisms on the planet. I mean, what about birds who migrate, right? Being able to read the constellations and the stars, to travel across the earth, that's pretty darn smart. How do those killer whales, how do they cooperatively predate the seals? There's got to be some kind of communication that we are not privy to. The other thing too is that when a behavior is meaningful to someone, they do it better. So if you love biology, it's so easy to study for this class. If you're somebody who's like, I really love chemistry, biology's okay, you'll do better in chemistry. Biology may be more of a struggle for you. Classes where you're more interested in are just easier, right? Because you have an interest. So things that we're interested in are easier for us to learn. When something best serves our needs, or especially our survival, we do it better, it's easier. I hate cleaning. I hate it. So I will take, but I'm meticulous about things. When I do something, I try and do it 100%. And so I will spend hours and hours and hours cleaning. I remember one day I cleaned the kitchen and it took me 8 hours. Now, we have a cleaning person who comes, or cleaning team that comes, and they can clean that kitchen. A person can clean the kitchen in like a half hour because they're really good at it. I'm not good at it, but it will take me so long. So when we get good at something or it means something to us, we do it more efficiently, we do it better. Animals are social organisms. We often see them in groups. The different kinds, do you all have those? Okay, good. The different kinds of ways that social animals communicate could be through touch. Touch often reinforces social bonds. If there's someone that you don't like, do you go up and hug them? No, you hug the people that you like. You have different instincts for touch with different organisms. Mothers and babies, fathers and babies. Partners. So that sense of touch can be very important in establishing social bonds. The primates, we see it very apparent in. We are primates. You can see that also in other primate groups. You can see that in this elephant with their offspring. One of the things that other primates do that we don't do, I'm grateful for, is called grooming. That one of the ways that they establish social bonds is that they will pick through the fur of others in their community, in their population, and they will take out parasites, dead skin cells, dirt. They will pick it out. They will actually eat parasites or bugs that they find on their other members of their population. So imagine that you went up to your friend and instead of maybe like giving them a fist bump or a hug, you just start going through their hair and you're looking for something to eat. That's different than what we do. Play behavior is very important in organisms. It helps organisms to get ready for the real thing. When you were little, you may have played school. When you go to preschool, there's a lot of play involved in learning. My younger son, he's now been in the country 11 months. He knew no English. We adopted him. And so as we're helping him learn English and we're learning his language, we use a lot of games, even flashcards, and make a whole game out of it. Now he does all these like dances for when he gets something right, and we make it really, really fun. We make it fun to learn so that he wants to do it instead of being like, oh, if I was just like flashcard, right? He gets something wrong, I kick him. We don't do that. We make it fun. So play helps you to practice. It helps you to enjoy what you are learning. If you make learning fun, you will do better at it. So different social interactions. Social interactions we might think of as like touch, for example, that it is something that strengthens social bonds, but we also can do things as organisms to prevent any kind of competition from happening. We know that evolution says that competition usually hurts or harms both members that are involved, that competition lowers your ability to survive. So to minimize competition, what organisms will do is they will do things like this. If you are a different primate and something is threatening you, that let's say that you're this kind of monkey and a gorilla comes into your territory and you start going, and right, they're gonna be like, whoa, they're ready to fight. So those are called aggressive displays. A bear, if you're ever out hiking, say you go out to one of the national parks this summer and you see a bear, there's a couple things that the bear will do. Is the bear often who'll be walking sees you and the bear might go. It's going to try to do an aggressive display to make itself look bigger, look aggressive, then it's gonna get you to back off because the bear really doesn't wanna fight you as much as you want to fight the bear. So, and here, even fish, I've seen this on Valentine's Day cards, and they're like, oh, these two fish, they are kissing. They are not kissing, they are measuring mouth size to see who's the more dominant one, who's got the bigger mouth, who could attack perhaps harder than the other one. Here's other aggressive displays. Cats, they will crouch down, they'll put their back up, they'll arch their back. I know my dog the other day did something for the first time I'd never seen her do, was there was another dog that came up and the person didn't ask, can my dog say hi to your dog? Because I got a little dog who just thinks that she's in charge of everybody. And they just came right up to our dog, and my dog's, she had hair on her back that stood straight up in this like arched manner, and I've seen her hold her butt up before, but this like hair sticking up, this row of hair, I was like, whoa. I'm like, I think you gotta take your dog back because she's gonna do something. So animals, especially like showing teeth, those are all different aggressive displays that are like, I don't want to fight you, I want you to be scared off. There are what are called dominance hierarchies. These will minimize conflict, aggression, competition within a population, within a community. Every animal knows its place. There's a hierarchy, a rank. This is where that pecking order term comes from. Chickens have a pecking order. The one that can peck the hardest is highest in the pecking order. Usually young individuals or weaker individuals are lower in the pecking order. Wolves have a leader of the pack. Bighorns will measure their horn size. They'll come up and measure. So they might look like, you might see photographs of them and it looks like they're fighting each other with their horns, but they may be just measuring up their horns and not actually fighting. So like here, for example, you can see these goats are doing that. Species often have territories. They're like, this is my area, that's your area, you stay in your area, I'll stay in mine. If another species comes into your territory, you will actively defend it. Oftentimes at the edge of your territory, you do aggressive displays to keep the other organism out. In your territory, you often have your home, all the parts of your niche, right? Your home, your resources, your food, energy, maybe your offspring. You've got all the things that you need to survive in your territory. Again, you'll do some kind of displays that say, hey, an aggressive display, stay away. Birds will do songs, so it sounds like, ooh, you're so tough, right? Birds will make different songs saying like, you're welcome to come here, or looking for a mate, but they also will have songs that say, you're getting close to my territory, go away. Cats will often pee, dogs too. It's always weird, my dog, I'll walk her, and a dog will pee right there, and then what does she have to do? She's gotta go pee on the pee. Like, oh, you want that area? No, I want it. I'm gonna pee on top of your pee because I want to claim that. Cats do that too. They mark, animals will mark their territories. We know that animals will defend their territories. There was a study done with stickleback fish, two different kinds of fish, what they did was they put them in an aquarium, they put a divider between, they could see each other through the divider. This one, after they left them in this divided fish tank for a while, so that A was established as this was its territory and this was B's territory. They put them in larger test tubes. They put B over on A's side. A showed the aggressive display. When they put A over on B's side, B showed the aggressive display. So there are some good things and bad things about having societies. One is that when you live together with a lot of other organisms, you compete for all the parts of your niche. Again, trying to vary your niche to enhance your survival. If there's a disease and everybody's in one area, diseases can spread quickly. You might make some other members of your population upset and they might kill you or hurt you. Predators may more easily spot you when you're a larger number of organisms. But there's also some good things about living in a society. If you're bigger, even though you might be spotted by predators, you can also deter the predators. The predators might be like, whoa, they look bigger. The zebra striping, remember the other day I said this is a camouflaging mechanism, that when a zebra might be alone, they might do a zigzag pattern to make them look blurry. But check it out, when you have a whole mass of them, it is harder to see individuals in this mass of stripes. You can hunt better, like the killer whales. As a group, they will circle their prey. They may try and trick them, right? Distract here and the other one grabs them. It's great to live in a group when you can divide up all of the tasks that you need in your ecosystem. If you live in a house with other people and you are cooperative and you're like, you clean the bathroom, you clean the kitchen, you do the grocery shopping, and you can divide up the tasks, you don't have to do them all yourself. And then it's easier to find a mate. Sharks live usually in a solitary environment where they're in the open ocean. They have to swim really, really far to try and locate a mate of their species. The dominance hierarchies within a group of animals functions to, does it increase competition? Limit population numbers? Minimize aggression?
Yeah.
Good, okay. It does not cause an increase in fighting, it decreases fighting. Good. Okay. Let's get to talking about where is it? Let's talk about energy flow within an ecosystem. So now we're moving up. We went from populations in an ecosystem. Populations are members of the same species. Community, members of different species. Now we're going to start taking a look at the relationship between living things, the biotic components of an ecosystem, the populations, the communities, and then also the abiotic components, the non-living things that are in an ecosystem. When we're talking about an ecosystem, we're talking about the relationship between the biotic living things and the abiotic living things, but in a defined area. So what are the ingredients for an ecosystem or for life in general? Life requires us to have energy. We need an input of energy. When we are looking at, and these terms are often confused when we're talking about, in everyday terms, nutrients and energy, there's a distinct difference between the two. When we are looking at something like a protein or a carbohydrate, when we look at these compounds, what we are seeing are two things within those compounds. One are the bonds that hold the atoms together. When we are looking at the bonds are the energy part. When we are looking at The atoms. The atoms are the nutrients, the chemicals, the atoms, the elements that are held together by bonds, the energy. When you take a look at this amino acid up here, what I have circled in green, I have all of the energy parts of an amino acid. All the parts that are circled in blue, those are the nutrient parts. So when we are looking at something like a biomolecule, there are two components, the bonds, the energy, and then the atoms or elements, which are the nutrients. And so there are distinct differences other than the way we might use them colloquially in our everyday language. Energy on the earth, for the most part, comes from the sun. It is the ultimate source of energy. There are other systems, there are other ecosystems, like if you go way, way down deep into the hydrothermal vents where sunlight does not penetrate. They use chemicals that come up from the core of the earth. They use those like we use sunlight for photosynthesis. The chemicals that process to feed an ecosystem energy is called chemiosynthesis. It is not super common, but there have been mutations and adaptations within an ecosystem and within the communities to utilize different sources of energy other than the sun. But again, not as common. So remember, energy, ultimate source is the sun. Energy is formed in the bonds of biomolecules, the chemicals, the atoms, the elements are the nutrients. So we're going to take a look at both of these, and we'll first focus on energy. Energy is based on the laws of thermodynamics. The first law of thermodynamics says that energy cannot be created nor destroyed, but it is changed from one form into another. And we know that energy from the sun is captured by photosynthesizers. They utilize that energy within the process of photosynthesis to produce our food. We eat that food. So we have a conversion, sunlight energy to food energy. We utilize that food energy for the energy of like movement within our bodies. So we have that movement of energy from one form into another. The second law of thermodynamics is the bummer of the whole thing about energy, that energy decreases as it changes from one form into another. Energy, the majority of energy in conversion of energy is lost as heat. So here's a big problem to solve. If you can figure out how to capture the energy that is lost as heat from the conversion of energy from one form into another, oh, you can make a lot of money off of that. There's people who are studying this. They are looking at the energy of electricity to the energy of lighting a light bulb. And they are capturing the energy that is produced by electricity to light up a light bulb. It only lights up for like a second. But if you could capture that heat energy in the conversion and light up a light bulb or an outlet or all of the essentials in a home, oh, you would be so, so, so rich. Nutrients, they never leave the system. Here's something to think about. You could have atoms or elements in your body right now that are billions of years old. Because as the biomolecules are utilized and all of the bonds are broken apart and the energy is taken and utilized, the nutrients are left. Nutrients will leave us as an organism through our waste or when we die. Just thinking about carbons. We breathe in oxygen, we breathe out carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide is then utilized by photosynthesizers to make our food. And then we breathe in oxygen, we break down our food. Those same carbons that we breathed out could be back in our body, in our food sources. And back and forth over time. Nutrients are used, and then they're reused, and reused, and reused. So a little bit about energy flow. Energy mainly comes from the sun. It's the ultimate source of energy. It reaches the earth in light, heat, and electromagnetic waves. The ultimate source that energy reaches community members is through photosynthesis. We're going to take a look at some of the terms of these organisms. Here, what I want you to notice in this diagram, you could see it again somewhere, is that you've got a lot of different color arrows on here. And in this diagram, you have solar energy, heat energy, chemical bonds, and nutrients. Nutrients, let's take a look at nutrients first. When we're talking about the atoms or elements that are passed from one organism to another, you can see that these purpley blue arrows, they go down, down, down. They come back up from organisms that are eating each other. They're broken, they're captured back by the detritus feeders and decomposers, and then they go back to the producers, and then they come back around and around and around. And you can see that the blue arrows make a cycle. None of the other arrows make a cycle. All of these arrows, the yellow, orange, and red, they all decrease over time. And so you can see when we're talking about the energy from the sun only goes into the producers, it's captured by the producers, and then you don't see this bright yellow arrow again. Energy is heat. You can see at every step that energy is lost as heat. The one fault I don't like with this diagram is these arrows should be enormous in comparison to all of the other arrows. The loss of energy as heat is huge. And then energy stored in chemical bonds. You can see again, the red arrows go down, 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 but they never make their way back to the producers. So they don't cycle back to the original producers of the energy. Producers are called producers. I love this because they produce their own energy within their cells. We always say that the product of photosynthesis is sugar, but then the sugars go into other metabolic pathways to become proteins, fats, carbohydrates, all the important things that we need in our body, those sugars eventually become. The process of photosynthesis seems so simple, that you put in some carbon dioxide, some water, and some sunlight, and they go through. You know that if you studied photosynthesis before, it is not just as simple as you mix these three things together and poof, out comes sugar and oxygen. That this process of photosynthesis is a very long, complicated metabolic pathway. All right, so here's your groups that do photosynthesis on the earth. They are plants, algae, and cyanobacteria. Producers are also called autotrophs. Auto means self, troph means feeder. It means that in their cells they can feed themselves through the process of photosynthesis. You and I are big enough to feed ourselves, but that's not what it means. It means that their cells can feed themselves and generate energy. So that's an autotroph or a producer. They convert non-living nutrients, water, carbon dioxide, and sunlight, into food, into living things. Consumers consume, they take in, consumers take in the energy and nutrients that are produced by the autotrophs or producers. Consumers consume plant material, algae material, maybe cyanobacteria, but they also can consume other organisms as well, fungi, protists, animals. Organisms who consume their energy from some source outside of their cells are called consumers or heterotrophs. Hetero means other, troph means feeder. They get their food from some source other than themselves. We have what's called primary productivity. Primary productivity is the amount of energy that the primary producers can get, how much they can harness, how much they can capture and make. If you are an autotroph and you do primary productivity, you do not make all the energy that you capture through photosynthesis available to everyone else in the ecosystem. You keep a bunch of that for yourself, because the energy of photosynthesis, the sugars that are made that then go to other metabolic pathways, become the parts that make you grow, become the parts that are food. So you've got two things that are products, or I should say 3 things that are product of the producers initially. Is one is that you have the energy that is offered to others in the ecosystem. The food that you produce, the tomatoes, the grains, the oils, all of those things that are made that you can offer onto the consumers. You also take a bunch of that sugar, you put it into metabolic pathways to grow your own body. So you keep some of that energy for yourself, and then a lot of that energy that you harness, it's lost as heat in the conversion of energy of making food or taking that energy for yourself. So photosynthesis, the outcome of it is not all available to the next group in the ecosystem, to the consumers. You have to keep some of that for yourself. So that's what we call net primary productivity. The energy that you make available to others in the ecosystem after you keep that energy for yourself to grow yourself, and after energy is lost in heat to convert from that original sugar to the food that you produce. That is net primary productivity. It's just like your net paycheck is what you actually get in money, but initially you have a lot more money, right? And you start to look at your paycheck and you're like, oh, they're gonna take that tax out, and they're gonna take that tax out, they're gonna put some money towards Social Security, and so all of those things go away, and what's left is your net pay. Primary productivity depends on a whole bunch of things. How many nutrients are available in an ecosystem? Do you have a lot? Do you have a little? How much sunlight is available? There is a big difference in productivity between the top of the earth and the bottom of the earth and the middle of the earth. Get a lot more sunlight directly at the middle of the earth, so productivity is much higher. How much water is available? If you are a rainforest, you have a dense amount of organisms, lots of nutrients available. You have the earth tilted toward the sun, and you have the cycling of water. You're called a rainforest, so lots of water available. And then the last thing is that your temperatures are pretty high so that you can have the cycling of the water, and you have the water available. So all of these situations, when they are high, you have a high productivity in an ecosystem. Even if one of those is low, like for example, if we think about like a desert, I don't think desert's on here. Well, desert's, oh yeah, way over there. So deserts have a lot of sunlight, they have a nice temperature, they have a lot of nutrients, but they do not have a lot of water. And so just having a low amount of one of those 4 things when we're talking about primary productivity effects, it makes this a very lowly productive ecosystem. When we take a look at, for example, our area of the world where we have temperate deciduous forest, and we compare that to a very highly productive area, the rainforest, if you've ever been somewhere where you've been in a rainforest, it feels vaguely familiar. It looks a lot like if you go midsummer, if you go hiking out here in our forest preserves, I always am like, this feels so much like, I go to Belize often, this feels like the rainforest in Belize when it's the height of summer here. Because we have winter and our temperatures go down and our water is locked up in more cold forms, our productivity goes down. So with seasons, something that is very similar to a rainforest, the seasons greatly lower this productivity. All right, let's stop there. We'll get to trophic levels next time. So today, I'm gonna talk about what parts. We're not gonna do all of lab 38 because it's a really long lab, and I want to use the parts that are most important for us. You will not finish lab 38 today. I'll talk about what I want you to finish because this next part of lecture will help you to answer the discussion questions. So we'll do some